Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. This USC wide receiver room, I think, is one of the more fascinating wide receiver units that you see in the country, and quite frankly, kind of getting slept on heading into 2024. Now, the USC fans that have been rocking with the fellas the last couple of weeks and months know that I'm a massive fan of this wide receiver room, but I think a lot of casual college football fans who might be outsiders looking in on this USC program going to look at it and say, not a ton of returning production for this USC wide receiver room. Obviously, Caleb Williams going to the NFL. You got some people asking questions about this wide receiver unit. I want to dive into some of the film and talk about what makes this wide receiver room so excited heading into 2024. And I really do think it starts with having a ton of young talent that can do a lot of different things. And that's something we've talked a lot about in terms of the best wide receiver units you see in the country. They have talented wide receivers, but all those wide receivers, they excel and do a lot of different things, which makes it really easy for someone like Lincoln Riley to attack opposing defenses in a lot of different ways. You see some wide receiver rooms that they'll have some really talented wide receivers, but a lot of wide receivers that do a lot of the same things, which makes it kind of hard to be versatile in terms of how you want to go after opposing secondaries. You look at this USC room and say a lot of different guys that do a lot of different things that look a lot different on the football field. That's kind of what fires me up the most about this unit heading into 2024. Going to take a dive into just a little bit of the film and kind of highlight the different traits that you have in this USC wide receiver room. Before we do, and as always, massive shout out specifically to the USC fans. It's been a blast kind of working and doing some film deep dives on a lot of these players on this USC roster. Last week we did Miller Moss. Next week we have Mason Cobb. Fired up to get into. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's start getting into this one. I think a large portion of why a lot of people are sleeping on this wide receiver room is it's composed of a lot of guys that are only going into their second year of college football. Now, they all flashed as true freshmen in different ways and in different scenarios. That being said, the returning production isn't incredible. I think a large part of that has to do with, two wide receivers that just went to the NFL draft in Brendan Rice and Taj Washington. So these true freshmen didn't have a ton of opportunity as true freshmen, but I think going into their second year, they are going to be kind of the focal points of this USC passing attack. Now, the first player I want to get into, and I think personally my favorite, and you could go to Duce Robinson, you could go to Zachariah Branch, you could go to Mekhi Lemon, a guy that I think is not getting nearly enough attention heading into 2024. I'm going to start with Jacobe Lane. And I think what fires me up the most about Jacobe Lane is you saw some elite set of skills, specifically when the football is in the air. When you talk about matchup nightmares, Jacobe Lane comes to mind. This is a guy that has the body control, the physicality at the catch point that is just really, really tough for a lot of defensive backs to deal with. And I think on top of that, Jacobe Lane's put on a lot of weight. So you talk about increasing that physicality at the catch point. I think for USC fans, that fires you up the most. And you dive into some of what Jacobe Lane does. I think it starts with the body control and the ability to operate in the red zone. This is something we talk a lot about. You look at USC, and one thing that is extremely important to them winning football games, scoring 7 points in the red zone. When you take a look at scoring 3 points, that's not going to win you a Big Ten championship, get you to the college football playoffs. You got to be able to score touchdowns. Jacobe Lane is one of those guys that when those throwing windows get small in the red zone, he's one of those guys you can just throw it up to. And again, kind of a matchup nightmare where you can put him all over the field. We're going to put him in the slot right here, get him on a nickel kind of box safety here. And Miller Moss is just going to throw it up. I mean, this is a matchup that Miller Moss is staring down the whole way and said, I trust Jacobe Lane to go up and make a play. That's exactly what you see. And I think two things you see. One, fighting hands and the physicality for Jacobe Lane as a true freshman, extremely impressive. But then the body control and the physicality at the catch point. I mean, he's a guy that just makes it so easy when he's going up and making a play on the football. Obviously tough at the catch point. And then you take a look at another rep that I really like from that Louisville game where we really got to see Jacobe Lane kind of put a stamp on what he's going to mean to this USC offense in 2024. A couple of things I like about this play. One, Miller Moss's pocket presence. I mean, that's really, really impressive for a kid that hadn't played a ton of football leading up into this Louisville game. manages the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield. And again, Jacobe Lane is one of those wide receivers that if you're Miller Moss, you see him with one defender, like just go give him a chance to go make a play. Chances are he's going to come down with it. Two things you really like here, and you're going to see it on the replay a little bit better. And he's fighting hands. He is dealing with contact exceptionally well as a true freshman. Now he's put on what you think he's going to do a better job of that, and then goes up and makes a play. You talk about those combat catches, those wide receivers that even when they're not open, they're open. I think that's Jacobe Lane for this USC program going into 2024. The next player I want to talk about, and kind of equally a matchup nightmare kind of guy, is Duce Robinson, who's just a bigger version of Jacobe Lane at 6'6", 225. Now, what I love about Duce Robinson is, one, the yards per catch. You look at this USC offense, Lincoln Riley offenses in general, hitting explosive plays is a massive part. You talk about why Lincoln Riley continues to put out offenses that are top 5 in scoring. It's because they're normally top 5 in hitting explosive plays. You look at Duce Robinson, only 16 catches on the year. Those catches went for 351 yards. He averaged 22 yards per catch. And two things stand out to me about Duce Robinson. One, you're going to see on this play, we're going to send this safety off the edge, and we're going to leave Duce Robinson or we're going to send this cornerback off the edge here, and we're going to have this safety try to deal with Duce Robinson. That's something that if Miller Moss sees, he's going to every single day. Sees this cornerback come off the edge, he knows that he's going to work with Duce Robinson. Now, there's two things that Duce Robinson can do from this standpoint. He's 6'6", 225, but what made him a 5-star prospect is the athleticism and the long speed. He's going to run right by this safety. There's not many wide receivers that have the size that Duce Robinson has that can just run right by defensive backs. Duce Robinson, one of those guys you continue to run this play. Miller Moss sees it, throws a beautiful football, hits Duce Robinson right in stride, touchdown. Now, the next rep you're going to see going to the San Jose State game, his first career game as a college football player, this is what stands out to me about Duce Robinson here is, hey, even if we can't run right by this defensive back, but we're going to roll this safety into the box here. I mean, again, Miller Moss knows exactly where he's going with the football. We are going to go trust Duce Robinson to go up and make a play. Now, what you're going to see special with Duce Robinson on this rep here is he's 6'6", 225. Even if a defensive back's in his hip pocket, it is really hard to go through that body and make a play. You continue to roll this film. Again, walking the safety into the box, it kind of a death sentence against this USC team in 2024. Miller Moss goes right to Duce Robinson. Now you see here, not a ton of separation. Duce Robinson doesn't necessarily run by this cornerback here, but the big frame makes it impossible for this defensive back to work through Duce Robinson, go get his hands on a football. And I think that only gets better as Duce Robinson continues to kind of enhance that physicality going into his second year, obviously going up, making a play, being tough at the catch point. Now, the last player we got to talk about is Zachariah Branch and how he fits in to this USC wide receiver room. And I've been pretty vocal that, all right, Zachariah Branch is one of, if not the most dynamic player in all of the country with the football in his hands. We saw that in terms of how he played wide receiver, but we specifically saw it in him in special teams. Now, you look at Zachariah Branch, and I think one thing a lot of USC fans, Zachariah Branch himself in an interview I just listened to, said the exact same thing. Hey, I showed what I could do as a special teamer. I want to show what I can do as a wide receiver, a polished wide receiver going into 2024. First thing you got to talk about is when you have Zachariah Branch, you can treat him as a true wide receiver. And I wouldn't say it's frustrating. You know, Lincoln Riley is a heck of a lot smarter than me when it comes to scheming up an offense. I felt like last year they just treated Zachariah Branch as kind of a gadget wide receiver. And they were just kind of getting the football into the flat or on-screen passes or end arounds. And I kind of look at reps like this and say, Zachariah Branch is a true wide receiver threat as well. We don't need to just treat him as this offensive weapon. And I think this is a perfect example where you're just attacking space. You're seeing San Jose State play this zone coverage here, but you're seeing Zachariah Branch kind of head up on a box safety. You're attacking that space every single time. You roll this clip here, one, Zachariah Branch, Mike's release. It's impossible for defensive backs to get hands on Zachariah Branch. This is one of the quickest, fastest players that you see in all of the country. And Caleb Williams knows exactly where he's going with this football. We are going to attack this space. Zachariah Branch obviously creating some separation, coming back, being present to the quarterback. Then you get him in space. I mean, as much times as you can get Zachariah Branch the football in space, good things are going to happen. But I think USC can do a better job treating Zachariah Branch like a true wide receiver in the 2024 season. No doubt he's going to get better at just running routes, creating separation himself going into his second year. Now, the second thing, and not to be ignored, right? I don't want to mince my words. Zachariah Branch is still a guy that you want to get creative with and just find ways to get him the football in space. You saw USC go to this concept a lot, specifically early in the year, where Lincoln Riley said, all right, Zachariah Branch is a true freshman, but he is also the most dynamic football player on the field. We're going to put him in different spots and get creative in terms of how we use him, how we get him the football in space. Kind of put him as like an H-back right here, where you roll the film. We're just going to leak him out into the flat and just get him the football in space. The amount of times you can get Zachariah Branch in these kind of situations, good things are going to happen. With this much space, I think a lot of USC fans know exactly what play we're talking about, what's going to happen. I mean, not only the 10-3 300-meter dash speed, but the short area quicks, just making people miss how smooth of a mover he is. He is a guy that can score a touchdown every time he touches the football. So you want to continue to get him reps in those spots as well. And, you know, to kind of tie a bow, if you will, on this conversation, there's a lot of other guys in this wide receiver room that I think are intriguing. I think Kyle Ford, you would probably funnel him into that Jakobi Lane, Duce Robinson kind of mold, where he's just this big body wide receiver that can work vertically and make safeties respect what you can do with the football. You have a guy like Jay Fair or Mekhi Lemon, who, yeah, I'm a big fan of Mekhi Lemon. There just wasn't that much film to go at, where you're just creating separation, kind of that Taj Washington kind of wide receiver that really can just do everything on the football field, but specifically in those third down situations where you need a wide receiver to win and find space. Mekhi Lemon and Jay Fair, I think, can do what Taj Washington did. And you start looking at just the amount of different bodies in this USC wide receiver room, including a tight end position that I think gets better. True freshman Joey Olsen, a guy that I'm very excited for. You have your guys in Duce Robinson, Jacobe Lane, Kyle Ford, that are going to work vertically. And if you are an opposing defensive coordinator and you don't want to leave safeties kind of covering the deeper third, you're going to just get burned by guys like Duce Robinson, Jacobe Lane. Now, if you want to commit your safeties to really defending that deeper third, play a lot of cover 3, cover 2, you're kind of leaving yourself open to guys like Jay Fair or Mekhi Lemon or Zachariah Branch underneath. And I think that's what makes this USC wide receiver room so special, where you look at other wide receiver rooms and they might have 3 really good wide receivers that do all the same things. You don't really have that guy that can operate yards after the catch. You don't really have that wide receiver that can work vertically down the field. It gets hard to kind of scheme up against opposing defenses. When you have all of these wide receivers that can do different things, it makes it almost impossible for opposing defensive coordinators to kind of deal with all the different capable bodies and different bodies that you have on the football field. That's what I think is so special about this USC wide receiver room. And again, on paper, you're going to have a lot of casual college football fans who look at this USC wide receiver room and say, you know, they don't have a guy with returning production over 500 yards coming back to this team. How good can they be? And I think a lot of USC fans are sitting there and saying, one, we have some really good young wide receivers that just didn't get enough opportunities during their freshman year. But I think even more importantly, you have so many wide receivers that can do different things. That's what I think makes this wide receiver room special. And you start looking at secondaries in the Big Ten. How many secondaries, how many defenses do we think can deal with the speed and playmaking ability that USC has? I think that's what's most fascinating about this wide receiver, and we'll cut it there. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.